Hello, Wake Up New Zealand. Anzac Day. Anzac Day always grabs my heart, listening to the service, seeing young and elderly men with medals on from relatives that have died in the war dead, etc. What courage, what moral courage, what bravery those men and women, nurses as well, went through. Now, they fought for our freedoms. Are we prepared to fight for our freedoms? Or are we going to let them die in vain? Isn't it least we could do? I would say so, wouldn't you? Because our freedoms are seriously in danger. So, talking about false security, lockdowns, isolation, social distancing, mandating of jabs for people, although the COVID jabs are still going on, etc. Surveillance, police helicopter over the top of your house time and time again. Do you think that's all finished? Are you living in that world of false security? Because if you think that's all finished, you are living in that world of false security. So when you get a petition together, and because you don't want a bill to go through, you want a certain legislation to be looked at again, you think that is totally wrong, it's not the best interest for all New Zealanders. So you get all these signatures together, it could be thousands and thousands of signatures. But because we do not have a citizens-initiated ballot referendum in New Zealand, the people do not have in-decision-making rights. The government has both binding and non-binding referendums. But the people of New Zealand only have non-binding referendums. Now, I do not hear any new political parties that are coming up that are supposed to be going into electioneering this year stating that they are going to put into their domestic policies citizens-initiated binding referendums, because it's really important. The people must have a voice in this country's decision-making. So, again, if you think the banks and the financial institutions are working apart from the government, you are highly mistaken, because they're all on the same political platform. So, where do you go from here? I mean, we have the government. It has introduced 1,900 plus UN international agreements, declarations, conventions, you name them, and New Zealand government have agreed to them. So these are mostly non-binding agreements. But because they're non-binding doesn't mean to say the government is not committed to them. So what happens, for instance, like UN Agenda 2030, that came about it was introduced in the UN in September 2015. They started working on the paper in 2013 in the UN. So what happened when New Zealand signed that non-binding agreement? Well, it entered Parliament under a soft law, and there it sat. Then there was no requirement for consensus to those who agreed and those who didn't agree. It was automatically accepted, and that's how it happened, under soft law. And then once entered into domestic law, then becomes legislation. And I shouldn't say law because it's not lawful. Once entered into legislation, then becomes an act that is legal upon the persons of New Zealand. So all politicians are on the same page because they all accept this. UN Agenda 2030, Jacinda Ardern openly admitted as a guest speaker at a Bill and Melinda gathering, Bill and Melinda Gates hosted gathering for the Global Shapers, WEF, openly boasted that New Zealand was the first to enter UN Agenda 2030 and its 17 global goals into domestic policy. And she urged that other government leaders throughout the world should take her lead. So that is a real problem. And we do not talk about what is happening from there. And we need to talk about this. Now, I've made myself a number of notes, so I'm going through these. So UN Agenda 2030 is one and the same as the Great Reset, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and the World Economic Forum's Global Redesign Initiative. Now, in 2010, the World Economic Forum, they had a summit. It was the first summit that they held as to Klaus Schwab's Global Redesign Initiative. And it was a gathering of world leaders, business leaders, CEOs, large corporations, etc. And at that meeting, he asked a question. He said, "What do you want to see the future of the world look like?" And from that meeting, he introduced a 600-page report, which was called the Global Redesign Initiative. Now, how was he going to get that across the line? Because he needed more than that. He always intended to be a global leader. He always intended for his global redesign to come about, to be actioned globally through every nation. So what happened was on the 13th of the 6th, 2019, the World Economic Forum and the UN decided they would scratch each other's back, and they signed a partnership agreement, a memorandum, a partnership. It was strategic and official. The WEF became the whispers in the ear of the UN. They became a global public-private partnership, a co-governance of the world of multi-stakeholder corporate capture. So the reason it came about was because the UN was struggling with their global goals. They said that they couldn't see that they could get this achieved by 2030. They needed more money and they needed more political clout. And Klaus Schwab, with his Davos meetings, had all of that. So they decided to scratch each other's back And what you have right now, when you hear about UN Agenda 2030, the Great Reset, Agenda and the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is actually documented on Auckland City Council website, you have the Klaus Schwab WEF multi-stakeholder corporation. Sorry, I'm lost. Multi-stakeholder corporations that have taken a global leadership. Now, we're talking about WEF representing Big Pharma and also Big Data, which they've been very reliant on. Big Data is absolutely essential for all this to happen. To actually, for multi-stakeholder corporations, they need to have multi-stakeholder governance, economy, for corporations to lead the economy worldwide. So therefore, they have to destroy the free market enterprise, the free market enterprise which gives freedom of choice, innovation, the choice, where you can choose what to buy and what not to buy, where there is competition in the marketplace, where there is limited government restrictions of what you can buy and what you can't buy. So the idea was to destroy that. But how could they destroy that? Think about it. This partnership agreement was signed 6 months before the pandemic. And what has plundered small businesses, farming communities? The pandemic. So this is my personal take on it. So if you think about that, at the beginning of the pandemic, you had the suburban newspapers. They said, oh no, we can't deliver those to you at the door because you might catch COVID. But New Zealand Herald and the mainstream media that were purchased by the government was allowed to be delivered. They didn't want any independent news reporting, just propaganda, fear spreading, panic, stay in your bubble. So the signs, the images, the washing your hands, the yellow lines to social distance, all messages, the sanitizer on the supermarket counter, all messages to stay fearful, to stay in your bubble. And families became fragmented. Relationships were broken up. People were unable to go to loved ones' funerals. The country, so many jobs were lost. The hospital system was put at risk because surgeries did not take place. Those who had cancer did not get seen to quick enough. And this is what happened in New Zealand. And mandating of jabs when already Pfizer CEO had said to the European Council, no, we did not test the Pfizer jab for transmission. And as we all know, it never stopped a thing, did it? So, deaths, post-COVID jab, no responsibility, no reporting, all hidden. Serious harms to people, downplayed, limited. March last year, the World Health Organization said, look, I want all your member states to actually be on the same page when reporting COVID-19 deaths. So this is what you do. If anyone has a RAT test and it comes up positive, if they die within 48 days, then that is a COVID death and it must be reported as so. So a man gets shot, that's a COVID death. A road accident, that's a COVID death. A suicide, that's a COVID death. And that 48 days in many countries was extended, as it was in New Zealand. And still this is happening. Still this is the same. And every member of Parliament was on the same page and still is on the same page. Psychological scaremongering. Fear, panic, fear, anxieties. Think of little children, those that were born in 220. This is all they have known is people with masks. What about those people with masks? What about those that lip read? Think of all those people who have been disadvantaged, who have been harmed. Fear, crisis, and more crisis, global warming, fever rising, fires, and more crisis, and another virus to hit the shores, and it goes on and on and on to breed fear and compliance. And as Ardern says, I am the only source of truth. 2022, Pfizer's the lawyer for the government who did the deal, the law firm that did the deal with Pfizer for the Pfizer jabs. 2022 sits on the Medical Council. The Medical Council that has been dismissing doctors for telling the truth, have been targeting them, character assassinating them. So what I have decided to do is actually run a series of videos, because although we've had the nudge, this is a practice session, because the people of New Zealand, they haven't finished with us yet. We have more to come, and we need to openly debate and talk about what that more is, because there is zilch debate about this. So let's get the truth out there, the facts. And I have researched a lot of what is about to come. So I urge and challenge Voices of Freedom, Counterspin, Reality Radio, Chantel Baker, Carl Bromley, Freedom and Rights, and other public speakers to debate. Liz Gunn, to be out there openly. Vinnie Eastwood, let's talk about this openly. Let's get out there. You need to put aside any bad feelings about any other freedom groups. You need to put that to one side. We need to come together in unity. Because if we don't, and we do not hold these politicians to account and responsible, our country is in much more serious danger. So please follow me with my series of videos on the information that I have for you, which needs to be spoken about, openly discussed, debated right now. Now, wake up, New Zealand.